In this video, I'm going to be talking about how I survived 2020 as a business owner, and I'm going to give you all the strategies, all the tips, all the techniques that I've used over the last year and before to actually set myself up for 2020. Obviously, I wasn't preparing for 2020 in the way that it happened, but I think because of the things I did in the past, it's been actually a good year. I think some of the strategies in this video, some of the strategies that I've used this year or have built up to in this year has helped me to basically just get through 2020. And I think, it's going to be beneficial for you. It's going to maybe help you think about how to manage yourself, how to, figure yourself out for 2021. I don't think that the current pandemic or the current situation is going to change anytime soon. And so this video is still appropriate because you're definitely going to be able to use these strategies to sort of future-proof your business, future-proof yourself. A little bit of a backstory before I get into sort of the main strategies. When COVID hit somewhere around February, March this year, I was really stressed about the fact that, how was my business going to perform? How was I going to still treat my clients? Were clients going to cancel their contracts or their agreements with me? And fortunately, I didn't actually have that situation. I was in a good position where some clients did cancel, but many of them actually carried on, and I actually signed on more clients than I did last year. So that was a good thing. And I was expecting it to be a bad year, but so far it hasn't. And so I think one of the reasons why it hasn't was because I had a real desire. I always have had a real desire to continue in my business, to grow my business, to keep productive, to keep busy. And, one of the things that obviously a lot of us were going through is, lockdowns and, just the stress in terms of the uncertainty of the future, especially economically, where lots of people were being laid off from work. And then there's also the mental sort of shortages of things like getting supplies, like where's food going to come from, over and above just the money point of view. And I think, obviously I was worried about my family. My kids are in South Africa. My parents are in South Africa. My brother and his family are in South Africa. I have friends around the world, and everybody was going through some stuff. Everybody was going through a lot of, different issues, a lot of different challenges. And so one of the things that I, just focused on or that I did early on was just had conversations with people. I had conversations with my friends. I kept in contact and am still in contact with my children, just having those conversations, keeping in touch with them, keeping close to them, via Zoom, via, WhatsApp, via Facebook, via whatever tool was necessary to stay in contact with them. I used whatever I could to stay in touch. And from a personal point of view, you can't really do much. If you're locked down and people are in different homes in different cities, different countries, different continents, you really can't do anything more than just being supportive, just being available, just having those conversations with people. The media and the pandemic and lockdowns and all of these things were creating situations where we couldn't just get out. We had to change our habits. We had to get food delivered. We had to get and I actually was in quarantine. I didn't have the virus. I haven't had the virus, but there was somebody in my building that did. And so during those early times when that happened, we had to just stay indoors for 14 days. My girlfriend and I, she didn't go to work, and she actually stayed home for a little longer than that because at work they had to just, make sure that everything was okay. But those 14 days was, I wouldn't say it was challenging because we had prepared, we had deliveries, there were protocols, there were procedures, but it wasn't the toughest situation for me because I had been working from home for a long time before this year. And so just planning ahead and making sure that I have resources available, that there's money in the bank, that I'm, able to transfer money to Thailand whenever I needed it, or dealing with my clients, having a stable internet connection, having equipment around me like my MacBook or my PC to actually do the work that I do, maintaining that sort of stability, and having those resources available definitely helped out. What I realized with this whole pandemic is that money, while a lot of people are struggling, a lot of people have been struggling, the money is still available in the marketplace. It's just maybe changed hands, where people have put money into the stock market, or maybe, the government has helped them out in some way. And so there isn't really a shortage of money. There may be a certain class of people or groups of people that maybe can't afford, high quality or high production value or high impact courses or programs online. Maybe you can't travel as much, but then there's a lot of other advantages to not traveling, to not being stuck in traffic, to being at home, to having your resources available for you. So while on one aspect, you're not spending money on traveling to work, those type of situations that have come up means that money is available for other things. And if you've gotten government funding, or you've had some help from other places, while you may think that there's a shortage, there really isn't. I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen, where we are constantly being told that there is a shortage, but that's more media. And I think I'm not discounting the fact that people are having issues or have had issues, but being able to build a business, or being able to supply some sort of service to somebody, whether it be just for free or getting involved with some sort of a thing. And I think one of the things that I did that helped out earlier in the year is Thinkific is a course platform. They actually had a program where they were offering creators and partners with their support people who wanted to go online and create courses. And so they said to new registrants, well, they'll put you in touch with a partner. I was one of them, and I managed to get 8 people to, was able to help 8 people put their courses together as being part of their system. And what ended up happening then was a few of those clients actually became proper paying clients. And while Thinkific did compensate of an amount to helping their clients out, it wasn't, in terms of just being a freelancer or being a business owner, it wasn't really worth my time in terms of money. But what happened after that was that, some of those clients actually did pay for services to the value that I wanted. So those sort of, inputs, or those things that I was doing just to help people out, whether it be on Facebook or through Thinkific program, or on LinkedIn, or wherever people needed help in answering questions, sometimes those did turn into clients. And so that was one of the things that I think was helpful for me. And then again, I've always been a big believer of managing money better, and over the last 5 years I managed to pay off all my debt. I don't owe anybody any money at all. No credit cards. I love cash only. So, if I have the money to buy something, I buy it. If I don't have the money, then I don't buy it. I am not lavish. I lead a very simple lifestyle. I don't do any brands really, apart from, maybe an Apple device, or, the certain things that I use in my work to do the work that I do. The tools that are brandy, I guess, to be able to sustain my living. That's one of the things that I've always been conscious of, is making sure that from a money point of view, there is a bit of a backup. So, a little bit of money available in case there aren't any clients, or in case a recession comes along. So having a bit of runway to sustain yourself and your family is a good idea. Even if you just start with a few dollars a month, where you're saving a little bit and starting to pay back some of the debt that you have, to start freeing yourself from that responsibility, from that burden. That's helped me tremendously, and I'm glad that towards the earlier part of this year, I was able to settle everything and not have that worry of continuously having to pay a credit card or pay off debt. The other thing I would say is that while on the client side, it's been okay, it hasn't been the busiest year that I thought it would be. I was expecting a busier year this year. But with that free time, with that extra time, I've been able to spend a lot more time with my children, online, obviously playing games, and, talking to them on the phone, and, just having conversations with friends, but also reading a lot. So I wouldn't say I'm a bookworm, but I've definitely invested time and money in books and just learning strategies, I read mostly entrepreneurial, personal development, and business type books. And so, every couple of days, I'm buying a new book, either listening to the audio or reading it on the Kindle app, to be able to just keep my mind active, to keep my mind busy, to keep productive, keep ideas flowing. And so that was also one of the things that I have been doing for many years now already. So the habit was already built in, but just really focusing in on the things that I wanted to learn. I registered for a few courses as well and met a few very good people through those courses, and just focused on developing myself, focused on really getting to grips with where I want to go in my life. And I think those relationships and those courses and those books have really just kept me going, kept me sort of sustained my mental well-being through this time and through this year, and it'll continue to do so. I'm certain of it, over the next few years and the rest of my life. The other thing I've done is I'm in therapy. So, through my divorces, through failed relationships, I recognized that in my past, I needed somebody to speak to, and I didn't always have access to to anybody to speak to. Obviously, in the past, we'd had to physically drive to a therapist's place, to their practice, to speak to somebody. But these days, because of the internet and because of the availability of certain websites like BetterHelp and others, I was able to connect with a really good therapist. We've been talking to each other every week. And so, these weekly sessions are more of a check-in to, check in on things that's going on around the world, things that are going on with me, things that are going on with my relationships, with my business, with whatever I want to talk about, really. And it's sort of an open space, safe place where I can let out and vent and talk about the things that are worrying me. And, there's solutions that come out of those conversations to deal with and to address some of these things. And I think without that person in my life, I would have struggled. I believe that I would have struggled this year to just manage myself. The other person that's really influential in my life is my girlfriend, and I can say that I love her completely. I trust her 100%. She's an anchor in my life, and she's somebody who I look up to, just in terms of being positive all the time, being happy, smiling, and she's definitely given me a different way, a different perspective on how to live life and what's important. And in the 3 years that we know each other, we haven't had really a solid argument, really. We're both very understanding of each other. We get along very well. We communicate often. We have lots of fun as well. And so I think having a good relationship, or having somebody who's solid in your corner, somebody who's really on your side, somebody who's really stable, who's an anchor for you, is somebody like that's important. And when the pandemic came around, the beginning of the year, I had said that when it comes to personal relationships, if you're living with somebody, married, or just cohabitating with somebody, or you're in a relationship with somebody, living together, one of two things are going to happen during a lockdown or during a pandemic situation. One is either you're going to split up with each other because you find out that you hate each other, or you actually get closer, and the confines of the four walls that you live in will bring you together as you work through these situations that we encounter. So having a good person in your corner, having somebody who's really trustworthy, who's on your side, who's supportive of your entrepreneurial dreams, of your health, your lifestyle, of your of everything that you are and you believe, I think is important. You don't have to agree on everything, but you also don't have to disagree on everything. So that's definitely helped me. She's definitely been an anchor and one of the core reasons why this year has actually been a better year than I thought it would be. Another thing is just being grateful. So the pandemic, I think, has definitely brought up a lot of emotions for a lot of people, where we're just grateful for being alive. We're just grateful for being in business. We're just grateful for the clients we have. We're grateful for the families that we have. Grateful for the food that we eat. Grateful for all the things that life has to offer. And I think, definitely when things start opening up, if they start opening up, and I don't expect it to be anytime soon, I think we'll be looking at the world in a different light. We'll be, reflecting back on what we've done. And if you haven't already done this, look back at your life and see, well, what are the things that you need to change? What are the things that you might realize that you should have done better or could have done better. If you wanted to learn guitar, like, now would be the time to learn. If you wanted to learn different language, like, now would be the time to learn. If you wanted to make friends, like, go on Facebook, go on Instagram, start connecting with people, get involved in courses, get involved in groups, get involved in things that you believe in. There's no real risk. Like, the internet is the communication device of the world, and so the world is available to all of us to explore and to keep motivated and keep going forward. The other thing is having a backup plan. So when it comes to money, I've always believed that having one source of income, if you work for a boss and basically it's your salary that you're dependent on, try not to have only one source of income. If you want to build a website, or build a Facebook group, or you want to build a coaching program, or you want to build a course, or you want to have multiple things that's going on. If you want to start a Shopify store and drop ship stuff, find ways to make money outside of your normal 9 to 5 or your day-to-day sort of work. There are some things that are risky, some things that are not risky. If you have some money, put in the stock market, maybe in a Vanguard or something like that, that'll at least generate some money. Or invest in courses to learn how to sell products via affiliate commissions. Right? There's so many different ways. Like, you could sign up for Rev and do transcriptions and get paid a decent amount of money for a couple of hours of work. You could register on Upwork and be a freelancer if you're a graphic designer, or if you want to go on Fiverr. You may think that the money is not enough, like to get paid $5 or $10, $20 or $50 for a certain thing. If you have the time, you have the resources, then why not register and do some stuff? Why not build something outside of your normal 9 to 5 or your core, your primary source of income? And those sort of extra things, those additional revenues over time will start showing you things, and you'll start learning about yourself. You'll start seeing things that are possible in the world, and you meet new people. Like, ultimately, it's all about building relationships and fulfilling a service and fulfilling yourself. So having multiple sources of income may sound like a stressful thing, might sound like a difficult thing to do, but let's face it, we've all got things that we want to do. We've always had skills that we can rely on. We're skilled in multiple different things, right? If you're a graphic designer, yes, you know how to do graphic design, but you also know how to communicate with people. You also know how to find solutions to people, right? You have to use social media to get your word out, to find clients. Like, or maybe maybe you work in a job, and so you help other people just get better at their job, or you teach people how to use Excel because they need to use Excel, or Google Sheets, or whatever the alternate thing is, whatever the supplementary, whatever the things are that you can tack on, or that you can find a way to help somebody else and be of service, can generate you some money. You don't have to always do things for free. And it may start off free. You may want to do things for free in the beginning, but definitely have a vision for creating multiple sources of income, so that you don't have to always rely on one source of income. And who knows, maybe that hobby that you have, maybe that side gig that you found actually turns into a business, or turns into a thing that will replace your primary source of income. What's the worst thing that could happen? If you just want to survive, just find ways to do that. If you want to thrive, then you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to start doing Facebook Lives. You've got to start talking to more people. Send emails to people to find out if they need help. If you want to get on a podcast because you want to grow your reach, like, do the things that you've been stuck on doing. Right? This video is a typical example of something that I'm working on in myself, is to grow a following online. Just start doing something. You've got the time, you have the resources, you have the energy. Even if it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day, do something to put yourself out there. Because let's face it, like, life is more than that. Life has got to be more than, it's got to have more meaning. And for me, sort of fulfillment, the thing that gives me the most joy at the moment is spending time with my kids and playing games with them. And and chatting to them. Definitely start doing the things that you've been putting off, whether it be just learning stuff or posting videos, or, don't be consuming all the time. Start creating something. Create your website, create a graphic, do a post, do a Facebook Live, just start making stuff. Because I think it's in the act of making, and it starts helping us to become something else. So with that being said, I hope some of my insights, some of my techniques, some of my tips will help you in the future. Comment below and let me know what you thought of it. And what are the strategies that you're using in 2020 and 2021? What are things that you've done in your life to have gotten through the challenges that we faced this year? So hit the subscribe button if you're liking the video, if you're liking the content, if you like the channel. Comment below, let me know what you think of the video. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.